The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as Victoria Chen stood in the empty hallway of her own company at 11:47 p.m., tears streaming down her cheeks. In her trembling hands, she held a crumpled $20 bill, the same $20 that had just shattered everything she thought she knew about loyalty, kindness, and the true character of the people who worked beneath her corner office on the 42nd floor. Just hours earlier, Victoria had been the untouchable CEO of Meridian Financial, a woman whose net worth exceeded the GDP of small nations, whose signature could move markets, whose approval could make or break careers. But now, disguised in thrift store clothes with her designer heels replaced by worn sneakers, she felt more lost than she had since her father's funeral 10 years ago. The plan had seemed foolproof when her board suggested it 3 weeks prior. "We need to know who we can really trust," Chairman Walsh had insisted, his weathered hands folding over quarterly reports that showed concerning patterns in employee satisfaction and retention. "Corporate espionage is at an all-time high. We need to identify the wolves in sheep's clothing before they can do real damage." So Victoria had orchestrated her own disappearance from the executive suite, spreading rumors through HR about a family emergency that would keep her away indefinitely. She'd crafted a new identity of Victoria Martinez, a recently divorced mother of 2 who needed work desperately enough to accept the night janitor position that had been posted for weeks without any takers. The first week had been eye-opening in ways she hadn't expected. Margaret from accounting, who always smiled sweetly during board meetings, had laughed cruelly when Victoria Martinez had accidentally spilled coffee in the break room, calling her typical help under her breath. James from marketing, whom she'd personally promoted twice, had deliberately left messes for her to clean while muttering about lazy immigrants who can't even speak proper English. But it was Thursday night, during her 3rd week in disguise, when everything changed. Victoria had been mopping the floors on the 30th floor when she heard the soft sound of someone crying. Following the sound, she discovered a man in his mid-30s sitting in a darkened cubicle, his head in his hands. His janitor's uniform was identical to hers, but she'd never seen him before. "Hey," she said softly, setting down her mop bucket. "You okay?" He looked up, and she saw eyes red with exhaustion and worry. His name tag read Marcus Rivera. He was younger than she'd first thought, probably early 30s, with calloused hands that spoke of hard work and a gentle face marked by sleepless nights. "Sorry," Marcus said, quickly wiping his eyes. "I didn't think anyone else was here this late." "I'm fine, really." But Victoria could see he wasn't fine. Something in his posture, the way his shoulders sagged with invisible weight, reminded her of herself during those dark months after her father's death when she'd had to fight to save the company he'd built from nothing. "I'm Victoria," she said, extending her hand. "Victoria Martinez started last week." "Marcus," he replied, shaking her hand with a grip that was surprisingly gentle for someone whose hands bore the calluses of manual labor. "Been here about 3 months now." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment before Marcus spoke again. "Can I ask you something? Do you ever feel invisible here?" The question hit Victoria like a physical blow. She, who commanded boardrooms and influenced markets, had never considered what it felt like to be truly unseen. "What do you mean?" Marcus gestured around the empty office space. "We clean their messes, empty their trash, keep their world spotless, but they look right through us, like we're not even human." He paused, then added with a bitter laugh, "Maybe it's better that way. At least they can't hurt you if they don't see you." Over the following night, Victoria found herself looking forward to her conversations with Marcus. She learned that he'd been laid off from his job as a construction foreman when the economy tanked, and had been working 3 jobs to support his 8-year-old daughter Emma since his wife had left them the year before. "Emma's the light of my life," Marcus told her one evening as they shared coffee from the machine in the break room. He pulled out his phone to show her a picture of a gap-toothed girl with pigtails and the same gentle eyes as her father. She wants to be a doctor someday, says she's going to fix everyone who's hurting. She sounds amazing, Victoria said, and meant it. She found herself wondering when she'd last had a conversation about someone's dreams rather than quarterly projections. She is, Marcus said, his face softening. That's why I work so hard. Every late night, every extra shift it's all for her future. I want her to never have to clean up after people who think she's beneath them. It was then that Victoria noticed the calculator on the table beside him, surrounded by crumpled receipts and bills. Medical bills, she realized, seeing the letterhead from Children's Hospital. Is Emma okay? She asked gently. Marcus's composure cracked slightly. She's been having these episodes where she just stops breathing for a few seconds. The doctors say it's probably nothing, but they want to run more tests. Tests that cost more than I make in 6 months. He rubbed his forehead with the back of his hand. I've been picking up every extra shift I can find, but it's still not enough. That night, Victoria lay awake in her penthouse apartment, staring at the ceiling. She'd conducted her test and learned what she'd set out to discover, that some of her employees were indeed wolves in sheep's clothing. But she'd also discovered something she hadn't expected, that sometimes the people with the least to give are the most willing to give everything. The next evening, she made a decision that would change everything. She arrived at work with her life savings converted to cash at $20,000 in small bills, stuffed into a worn envelope. She'd planned to give it all to Marcus, to tell him who she really was, to fix his problems with the wave of her corporate checkbook. But when she found him, he was training a new janitor, an older man named Robert who'd just been hired and was struggling with the industrial floor buffer. Don't worry, Marcus was saying patiently, it takes practice. Here, let me show you again. Victoria watched from around the corner as Marcus spent his entire break teaching Robert techniques that had taken him weeks to master, sharing shortcuts that would make the job easier, giving advice about which supervisors to avoid and which were actually decent people. Why are you helping me? Robert asked. Most people just want to get through their shift and go home. Marcus shrugged. We're all in this together, you know. Life's hard enough without making it harder for each other. It was then that Victoria realized her mistake. This wasn't about money. This was about something much more valuable, the kind of character that couldn't be bought or taught or mandated by corporate policy. Instead of revealing herself, she found herself approaching Marcus differently. Marcus, she said, pulling the envelope from her jacket, I found this in one of the offices upstairs. It's not addressed to anyone, just has your name written on the front. Marcus took the envelope with confusion, opening it to find the money inside along with a note she'd hastily written, for Emma's medical bills. From someone who believes every child deserves a chance to become a doctor. The expression that crossed Marcus's face was something Victoria would never forget, not gratitude, exactly, but something deeper. A recognition that kindness still existed in the world, that someone had seen his struggle and cared enough to help. I can't accept this, he said, trying to hand it back. This is too much. Someone must have dropped it by mistake. No mistake, Victoria said softly. Sometimes good things happen to good people. Marcus's eyes filled with tears. I don't understand. Why would someone do this for us? They don't even know us. Maybe they do, Victoria said. Maybe they've been watching you take care of everyone around you, and they decided it was time someone took care of you. That night, Victoria sat in her real oasia, staring out at the city lights and thinking about everything she'd learned. She'd started this experiment to identify threats to her company, but she'd ended up discovering something far more valuable, that true leadership wasn't about commanding from above, but about recognizing and nurturing the goodness that already existed in the people around her. The next morning, she called an all-hands meeting. Standing before her employees in her usual designer suit and power heels, she felt like she was wearing a costume. The real Victoria, she realized, was the woman who'd mopped floors beside Marcus Rivera and learned what it meant to truly see people. "I have an announcement," she began, her voice carrying across the packed auditorium. "Effective immediately, we're implementing several changes to our company culture. First, we're raising the starting wage for all hourly employees to $25 an hour, with full benefits including comprehensive health care for employees and their families." The murmur that went through the crowd was audible, but Victoria wasn't finished. "Second, I'm creating a new position, a director of employee well-being, and I'm promoting Marcus Rivera from our janitorial staff to fill it. His job will be to ensure that every employee at this company feels seen, valued, and supported." She scanned the crowd until she found Marcus, who was standing in the back with his mouth agape. Their eyes met across the room, and she saw the moment of recognition dawn on his face. "And finally," she continued, never breaking eye contact with Marcus, "I want everyone to know that the strongest leaders aren't always the ones with the biggest offices or the highest salaries. Sometimes they're the ones who take time to teach a new employee how to use a floor buffer, or who work 3 jobs to pay for their daughter's medical bills, or who believe that we're all in this together." After the meeting, Marcus approached her with wonder and confusion written across his face. "Victoria Martinez," he said slowly, "or should I say, Victoria Chen?" She smiled, the first genuine smile she'd worn in years. "Just Victoria. And I have a question for you." "What's that?" "Would you like to have dinner sometime?" "I'd love to meet Emma properly, and I think she'd like to hear about the scholarship program I'm starting for employees' children who want to go to medical school." Marcus's smile was brighter than all the fluorescent lights in the building combined. "I'd like that very much." 6 months later, Victoria stood in the same hallway where she'd cried that night, but this time she wasn't alone. Marcus was beside her, and Emma was between them, chattering excitedly about her first day of Advanced Science Camp, a program funded by the Victoria Chen Foundation for Educational Excellence. "Dad," Emma said, tugging on Marcus's sleeve, "when I become a doctor, I'm going to help people just like Victoria helped us. Right?" Marcus looked at Victoria with eyes full of love and gratitude. "That's right, sweetheart. The best way to honor a gift is to pass it along." Victoria squeezed Marcus's hand, thinking about how sometimes the most important business decisions had nothing to do with profit margins or market share, and everything to do with recognizing that behind every uniform, every name tag, every job title, was a human being worthy of dignity, respect, and love. The fluorescent lights still hummed overhead, but now their sound seemed less harsh, more like a gentle reminder that sometimes the most beautiful discoveries happen in the most ordinary places, when we finally learn to see with our hearts instead of just our eyes.